Edaps, man. It's terribly hot out there. I can't believe I even bothered trying to wear this suit out in some more. You doing good over there, slave? I don't know if you realize this, but your green screen is kinda like not aligned, right? You're not even getting fully in the screen. You ever had something like this happen to you before? A time where you feel like perhaps everything that you have lived for to this point might just end up feeling like a lie. Look here, slave, I didn't come back all this way just to listen to you rant on about your poor man philosophy, but yeah, I'll humor you. Speak your mind. Just take a look at this. Oh. The hell is this? It's a relic of a bygone era, a game that as a kid I really wanted to play, and it's only now recently that I found out that this game was just yet another Kasugi. Okay, you know what? It seems like this game is really bothering you quite a fair bit. How about, you know what they always say, right? Talking about your feelings will probably make you feel better. So why not? Rather than sitting here being depressed all day about the fact that this game is bad. I don't know if that's even a thing that can happen. But why not, instead of sitting here despairing about that, you take this and you go make a video about why this is a bad game. And I'm not going to watch it because it doesn't concern me at all, but maybe you could show it to someone and have it be a fun thing, perhaps. Yeah, for once it does sound like you might actually be making sense, which is quite rare coming from you, but for sure, it might be something I could try doing.
You know, if there's anyone out there who goes like, what's with this basement dwelling nerd shitting on these games? Is he some kind of hater? First up, I don't live in a basement. I live in a 5.5 tatami sized room in Japan, so arguably it's just as depressing, if not more. And more importantly, look, the whole hater thing, it's not really all that true. Well, I may shit on these games quite a lot. I do really love, in a weird, endearing way, my console games as well. Because if I didn't, would I really be going around doing stuff like this? Shit. And more importantly, would I be going out of my way just to buy the limited edition version of the game in Japanese? And not only that, but to be going out of my way to buy the actual marketing release CD that has also been used in the advertising materials within the game stores around the country. Right, so I really do enjoy and put a lot of effort into understanding and appreciating the console games of Japan, so I'm not the hater, you're the hater for this, alright? I get to decide if I love the game or not, even if it's a little bit shit. But that said, out of all the titles we've played so far, all of the console games on the console game of the year list that we have gone through, this might be the most unique one in multiple ways. First up, in the fact that this game probably has the most amount of goods going for it. It's not just this tapestry, but there were actually other stuff sold as well. And more importantly, this was probably the title that had the most closeness to my heart back when I was really young and this game had first released about 12 years ago. At the time when I first saw that this game was being released, I actually saw it not in like an online trailer on something like YouTube, but through the gamer magazines that existed back in the day when companies used to print more of the information about the upcoming titles and game walkthroughs on paper rather than putting it online. And in that book, I remember seeing both the English and the Japanese versions, and the Japanese version actually painted a pretty good picture of the game, especially the one by Famitsu, which at the time gave it a fairly high rating. And not only that, but the screenshots of the game made it look pretty interesting. And there was a lot of buzz around the people who worked on the title, and even in the English version, when I first saw the article, while it was critical about the shakiness of some of the game's features, it talked a lot about the uniqueness of the game as one where it actually tried to create a game that was very unique and in a way the first of its kind. And yet, as a result, it was precisely because of all of this that when I got older and I started to get more into console games and I realized that this game was on the console game of the year list, I was actually really shocked at the time. For those of you who do not know what a console game is, it's basically what the Japanese would call a shit game. And every year up until around 2021, there has been a list of the worst ranked by people within Japan. going back all the way till like around 2006. And so seeing this game end up on that list over in 2012 really shocked me a lot. And as someone who actively got into console games a lot later, I actually decided that I would go back and give this game a try, just as with all of the other console games I've done till now. And for the year 2012, while this game did not win the worst game of the year award, that actually went to a game that was far, far worse, it did pop up on the list among specifically the top games, which as a result really shocked me at the time when I first found out about the console game of the year list, as this was a game that, while I didn't manage to play when it first released, was one that I had been yearning to play for many years after. And so I decided that we would take this occasion to give it a try and see why this game ended up on the console game of the year list for 2012. I didn't know we were 20,000 years in the future, but that aside. The game was developed by Image Epoch and published by Bandai Namco, and at the time the game was basically being advertised as a game where the entirety of the game's world would be drawn in anime, which sounds like the cringiest piece of marketing I've ever heard. It gives me real Sakura Kon Ikimasu sort of vibes, you know? I
love anime! Yeah. And manga! And gaming!
Sort of thing. So, not the best way for them to start off, but it did sound like a very ambitious project. In fact, the company that was involved in the animations for it also announced that they were drawing 20,000 animation still frames for use in this game. Now, for those of you who are really into anime, you might realize that number sounds worryingly, dreadfully low. But, you know, at the time when we heard all of the people who were involved with this project, there were some people who, prior to seeing the gameplay, were still quite hopeful for it, to be honest. Because you see, there were actually many very big names working on this project, not on the level of a AAA all-star cast like with Blue Dragon, where you had Nobuo Uematsu, as well as all of the other developers around, stuff like Final Fantasy. You had the Dragon Ball artists working on art. It wasn't on that level. I would say this is more like the single or double A equivalent of that instead. But at the very least, all of the people who worked on the title were fairly big within the industry. For example, the art for the game that you see over there, not the art used within the game itself, that's actually done by a separate group, but the character design itself and the art for much of the marketing, such as the posters, the in-game still images, as well as the limited edition box, is all done by Wolfan, the guy who did the art for the Monogatari light novels. And on top of that, the music for the game was done by Koshiro Yuzo, someone who is credited as being one of the founding fathers of the way that music would be done in games in Japan, as he worked on many massive titles back in the day. One of the main writers of the game, Kato Yoichi, was someone who was fairly known within the industry at least as someone who was quite reliable and able to write good scripts, as he is someone who had written scripts for everything such as Conan to Uchiu Kyodai to Idol Masters, Aikatsu, Scarlet Nexus, what have you. He has had a long and fairly decorated history. Even the producer, someone sent from Bamco, was someone who actually worked on the Dark Souls games initially as a producer as well. You know, it was mostly from Souces, but maybe he did something as well. And even after his tenure with Bandai Namco ended, he then went on to work for Square Enix in the very ridiculously and maybe somewhat supervillain-esquely named Creative Business Divisions 4 and 5. Maybe this title, you know, we're starting to see a bit of a link there perhaps. But aside from all of that, you also had fairly big seiyus such as Hanazawa Kana as well as Kitamura Eri working on this title, alongside with the animation studio Satellite. They did make some fairly good stuff such as Macross as well as Fairy Tail. And so it's not like there was some weird low tier bottom of the barrel animation studio that was hired for this. It's a studio that has quite a fair bit of experience and many veterans working within it as well. And even Image Epoch themselves were a company that had worked on many different RPG games in the past, maybe more well known to boomers as well as the millennials rather than the zoomers, since the company unfortunately no longer exists. But back in the day, the company used to work on games such as Luminous Arc, the 7th Dragon series, Toshin Toshi, as well as Criminal Girls, which for some people the last one might spark a little bit of a glimmer in your eye, being like, ooh, is that the thing I think it is? It probably is. It's a game which very famous more for the weird humorous segments of it, but even if you take those out of the game, that was still a title that actually worked pretty solidly as an RPG in my opinion. All in all, from everything I've said so far, you might be wondering then like, well, there are so many fairly decent names working on this title. What happened? How did this game, which, you know, nowadays some people have warmed up a lot more to the concept of it, but what caused this game that had so many good names, big names working on it that should have hyped it up a lot more, ended up being considered one of the worst games of the year in Japan? In fact, this game was actually so bad that upon releasing its first ever trailer, which included gameplay in it, people online on like 2chan as well as on the message boards at the time were already saying that this game looked like a mine that was about to blow. Well, we don't know the exact number of sales of the game since no one ever came forward and declared that number. We do see many sites from the era saying everything from it ranging from about 30+K on launch to about 40K by the end of the year. So a game that really just performed abysmally at the time, all things considered, considering all the names working on it in particular. And so today we're gonna be looking at this and trying to see for ourselves what exactly may have caused this to happen. However, before we actually get into talking about the game itself, we need to talk about the background of the company that developed it from the period prior to the game's release up until slightly after, because I feel like talking about this would actually help to set the stage a lot better for why this game may have perhaps ended up in the stage that it did, and also, to be honest, to me at least, the story of what happened with the company itself is arguably a lot more interesting than the game itself. That said, one thing I realized with the entire situation is that if we wanted to go through it in its entirety, it'll probably be the length of an entire video of its own, and I actually kind of want to try and see if I can gather more information about the situation at hand before making a video on the entirety of the company itself. So we'll try to keep this simple and in a way that would actually fit in the length of a video that's supposed to be talking about the game instead. So in order to understand the situation at hand, we first need to go back to March of 2010. This is when the financial reports for the year end 2009 would have been announced, and it was there where the company reported there was actually 4億5197万 yen in debt. This is about 4.1 million USD thereabout in that era's money. So it really wasn't a good situation that they were already in. At the time, there was a lot of internal conflict going on within the company. It was reported with many factions starting to form, and the general direction of the company had gone from we want to make games that people would enjoy to more of we wanted to make games that would be safe and earn a lot of money so that our team looks the best. Which, as you can imagine, is not a very good way to be trying to create new and interesting titles going forward when people are actually afraid of experimentation and just want to make a lot of money. At the time, the only money-making department left in the entirety of the company was the art design team ran by Komura Issei. And at the end of the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake, he decided that he wanted to go independent and take 2 members of his team with him. And so he brought this up with specifically just the CEO, and at the time the CEO said one of what I believe to be the most badass lines I've ever heard a CEO actually utter, which was that he told Komura at the time that if you're gonna leave with those 2 people, the company won't be able to survive anymore, so if you're gonna do it, take your entire team with you. However, not long after that, he was actually called into a board meeting where apparently the rest of the board had caught wind of what he was doing. And at the time that they told him that what he was doing was akin to a coup, they drove him out of the company, after which he then went on to form his own company, 108, where he actually struggled for the first few years due to the fact that he actually prepared enough space for the entirety of his department to live with him. But having been driven out of the company alone, he could no longer do that, and he was settled with the debt of having to keep the entirety of the location and all the stuff he had prepared. And I would like you to remember that since this game, Toki Towa, released in 2012, this means that if this game had been in development for more than a year, which it quite likely was, all of these things that we have gone over, from the company being in massive debt to all of the internal conflicts, all of this would have happened during that game's development. By the year 2012, the year of the game's release, the straits in the company was so bad that the CEO actually made a fairly telling analogy in an interview he gave later on, which was that there's an analogy out there of how if we do not drop 4 out of every 10 people from this boat, we'll all die. In my case, it was 7 out of 10. He did end up regretting trying to keep the company afloat at the time. The company then went bankrupt in 2015, and there was an entire story about the CEO himself running and disappearing and no one knowing what happened to him that continued on for quite a fair while before it was confirmed that he was alive. A lot of things happened. The company went bankrupt and many of the titles they worked on for other companies were then outsourced to completely separate companies as well. While the IPs that the company itself held, many were just lost to time in one way, shape or form. Look, there's an entire super long ass story we could go through here, but I feel like in the essence of time, we've already gone way too long with this. So if we want to talk about the game itself, we should probably end this here. But if there's enough interest in the story of Image Epoch and this whole thing, I'll make sure to do even more research. I'm actually trying to reach out to some of the people who worked on these games as well in that company. So right now we need to step away from this very interesting story to go back to that, I suppose. So when you first fire up the game, everything actually seems fine. The music is enjoyable, made by a very skilled musician. The art is the character design created by Wolfan, so it's also very nice to look at. And the UX in the options menu is actually full of very important options that let you customize your experience as well, which you might think it's weird that someone is talking about the options menu like this, but we literally have played games with far worse. So everything thus far looks very competently made, which belies what we are about to see from this point onwards. Because the moment you fire up the game, you enter a cutscene, which is something along the lines of a very standard JRPG cutscene where you have the characters standing around a static background just talking. Only something just looks a little off.
No, you're right.
Because yeah, everything in this game, as mentioned before, is gonna be done using character models that have been animated by Sunrise Studios, meaning that even during the very standard cutscenes, those character models are going to be used along with the traditional static backgrounds that you see in most RPG games out there. And as a result, it does feel a little weird, simply due to the fact that, as you can imagine, by virtue of the fact that only 20,000 different hand-drawn animations are in the game, when it comes to the cutscenes like these, some of the movements are being reused, which right off the bat in the very first cutscene that we are seeing, the fact that this is already a thing does make it feel a little worrying. And because of the fact that the character models are of a different style of animation from the way that the hand-drawn backgrounds are, it does feel like something is just a little off when they are trying to walk through this wall and as they stand around and move within it as well. But that said, when we do get to the fully animated cutscene after this, it's completely fine. Some may say it looks a little dated, but considering this was made in the early mid-2010s, I feel like this isn't too bad. In fact, for that period, this would have been completely fine. So I don't have many issues with the animated cutscene itself. So for those of you who are wondering, the plot of this game is basically that the blue-haired guy is the protagonist and he's about to marry Toki, who is the pink-haired girl. And on the day of their wedding, he is the one that ends up getting penetrated instead. And so in order to save him from his penetration, his wife, who apparently has a split personality which is revealed within the scene itself, travels back in time to try and figure out the culprit of the incident and put a stop to it before this could happen. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to her, her husband-to-be has been put into the body of her pet dragon, and he's basically brought back in time in that body and is initially unable to communicate with her. And the story basically starts there. After the animated cutscene, we're then put into another traditional RPG-style cutscene, and it's after this cutscene where we're finally able to move around within the first area in the game, where our goal is basically to get out of the forest that we find ourselves in. Now, I hope that you're ready for the rest of the cutscenes in this game, because the animated cutscene that you saw, we won't be seeing another one like that for quite a while. Instead, the rest of the game will be progressing in the style that you see on the screen now, where you have the 2D character sprite moving around in the 3D world. When you actually play it within the game, there come many issues. First of which is the fact that this game moves in tank controls. For most of you, you're probably already like seeing the red flag go up. But for those of you who do not know what tank controls is, basically in your standard RPG game, typically the way you move around is that you would, let me get a controller for this. Pushing forward moves you forward. That's normal. This is what we all expect. Pushing backward, kind of instead of having a character dash backwards or move downwards in the standard RPG fashion, would cause them to move very slowly by walking backwards instead. A little strange. I feel like we didn't really need that, but it is still fine. We're still going in the right direction. Pushing left makes your character turn left, but it doesn't move them forward. And pushing right turns your character right instead of moving them to the right. Usually games that use this tend to use it because the clunkiness of the controls is something that they intentionally want to have in the game to feel vulnerable. Or in games that choose to have a fixed camera angle for most of the scenes because they want to frame things in certain ways, in those cases as well, it makes it easier to navigate the map when moving forward. It's always moving your character where they're facing forward rather than in whatever direction the camera shifts to at any given point for a standard control system. So in those cases, I can kinda get it. It doesn't feel nice to control and it does feel very clunky compared to the standard controls that most games use nowadays. But I can get the idea. But with this game, there really was no real reason for it to be in, and it kind of makes it harder to get around. And the thing is that because of how big the maps in this game are, like this map for example, the one that you start in, it takes maybe like 10 minutes to get from end to end, just running straight if you understand how best to use the tank controls. So the fact that they are using controls such as this basically just slows down the player in a way that just kind of detracts from the experience, especially since the usage of the tank controls in and of itself does not provide an added ease to the experience of navigating the dungeon either. Nor does it provide any particular challenge, because with this game you don't really have enemies that just stand on the map and chase you. Rather, instead, all of the enemies are random encounters, kind of like with the grass in Pokemon. The characters being a 2D sprite in a 3D world, it feels a little out of place with the way that this game does it. It feels like I'm playing an FMV game from the 90s. For those of you who don't know what that is, I'll put an example of it here because I'm a nice guy. But basically games where people would take pictures of themselves and put it into the game and use it for the animations within whatever sort of background that they want. The thing with that style of making games is that it's cheaper in a way because you could basically just have a person with the full motor movements of a person and also have the backgrounds all look pretty fine at the same time. But of course, if you're using a 2D hand-drawn background with a 3D human in it, it would look kind of weird. And the same can be said with this game where in screenshots where everything isn't moving, it doesn't look as bad. But the concept, the way it's being implemented in this game with its limitations does make it look a little weird, especially because the character's movement speed doesn't feel like it syncs very well with the movement of their legs either. In the camera angles as well, they don't really have any real use at all in the way that they're implemented in this. Because if you try to pan the camera down, rather than do the standard RPG thing where it pans the camera down and lets you look downward in front of the character, the camera actually moves down towards her ass and you just get a full-on shot of just her legs and the skirt instead, and it actually makes trying to navigate worse because you can't really see anything other than that. I guess that probably is meant to be used by some people with specific kinks maybe. If you were to try to then pan the camera up instead of getting a nice view of the character with the surroundings around them, the game just kind of does this weird thing where it just pans the camera into the sky and you can't really see the wall at all. Though I can kind of get why they chose to do this instead, because if they were to actually implement the standard 3D RPG camera movements wherein left and right will basically circle the camera around the character clockwise or counterclockwise, having the camera tilt above the character's head or tilt downward in a way where you can actually see the terrain from the character's back facing outwards in case you're going uphill. All of that would basically require your character to have some level of depth so that it doesn't look too out of place. And what I mean by this is that if you're gonna spin the camera around the character, in the case of this game, it would mean that you would need to have enough 2D sprites that you can basically have it move around the character and show the depth of the character, as you're gonna need a side view, a front view, a diagonal view. Enough of the character drawn such that you can spin it around them and see them from all angles. And so in order to save costs, they probably just did this instead, which kind of defeats the entire purpose of trying to create a game in an entire 2D anime environment, but we'll put that aside for now. What this feels like is like they didn't do any grey box testing at all initially. Like they didn't take a mock version of the 2D character model, put it in a mock version of the 3D world, see how it moves, and then try to figure out how best to implement the controls around it. Instead, it feels a lot like they just completed the full 2D model for the character sprite, completed the full 3D world, put the character in, and then were like, I think things aren't working out so well, let's figure out a way to get the controls to work. And they basically started tweaking numbers there, and they kind of realized that the camera angle thing wouldn't work out, and so they just implemented that half-ass kind of useless camera angle system within the game. Like, a lot of it feels like the art side came first, which, to be fair, that seems to have been an important part of the game, and it's not like you can't do that first in the game. Gris did it pretty well, so did Gorogoa. You kind of can see that you can make that idea work, but with this game, with it trying to deliver the type of experience that it did, I feel like it kind of missed the mark. Kind of like how, because of the fact that enemies don't loiter on the map, they just tend to look really huge and desolate because you just really see nothing in the world itself. And so because nothing is really ever happening on the map, you just do have a lot of time to just sit there and stare at the character model, and the more you sit there and stare at how I'm moving through the wall, everything just starts to feel more and more off, and it just started to bother me more and more why all the camera things were the way they were. It would have made a little more sense to have like 2D enemy models just loitering around the map, and you can symbol attack them and just like start the battle and stuff like that. It would make the world feel more populated. Although once again, considering the state that the company was in, they probably didn't have the budget to try to implement something like that as the issue as well. Especially when you consider the fact that the entire team would probably have been pretty demoralized with the entire thing that was going on during the process of this game, because remember, during the period where this game was being developed was when the company was running into the red, and the whole thing with the guy supposedly being kicked out and being alleged of trying to start a coup all happened as well, and there was all the factionalism going on. Especially the art team that would have been under the guy, as well as many of the other people in the company, they might have been in a very demoralized and like tuned out state at some point during this development. So yeah, I can kind of see like why this selling point the game was supposed to have may not have gotten pushed through in the end as a result. This problem is also shown when you're trying to move around the world map, because the entire world map is just giving me complete flashbacks to Nugia, with the entire like just a singular 2D map with nodes on it, and you're moving around using those nodes. Now, the thing with this system in and of itself is that it's kind of just fine, it's not a bad system. And in the right context or game, like if you did this in Persona 3, for example, from the PSP, I really wouldn't have minded at all. But the issue is that it does once again run against the style of graphics that this game was trying to push within it. And it feels kinda like a waste, especially when you're navigating through the town, because when you do navigate through the town, basically what you do is you go from the world map into a town map, and then you just click nodes on the town map to go to the specific parts in the town, so you don't even get a town model to run through. Like, not having a world map like in the way that like something like Vesperia would have had, I can kind of see that as being like fine, and I think it's like not every game has to be the big budget RPG title. But at the same time, it does feel kind of like a waste that this game didn't try to capitalize on using all of these different points to push further the fact that it was supposed to be the super cool visuals game in the end. This is also partially why every single time you speak to a character on the battle map, or on the world map for that matter, it basically has to cut in and out of a cutscene, I feel like, because there was very little in terms of the design for a world map. And for some reason, they also really didn't want you to just walk up to a character, push the interact button, and just have the interaction take place like that. And so even for something as simple as just talking to an NPC, it will trigger this cutscene, which especially in the dungeon maps where you're traveling around, it kind of breaks the tempo of the game a little more. And it also means that load times overall are just that little bit longer, since looking at the speedruns in Japan, it would seem like there's a 20-minute gap that exists thereabout between the actual save data time and the speedrun time itself. What this means is that for this game specific case, because of the fact that it doesn't actually take your load screen times into account, that about 20 minutes of the 2-hour plus speedrun out of 120 minutes, it's about 20, so about a sixth of the speedrun is spent in load times, which, you know, is quite a lot of time to be spending waiting for the game to load within the period of time, implying that the game just really did not perform very well either. The sound balance is kind of really off as well, especially in the battles. Like, I don't know why, but sometimes the BGM is just way louder than the characters instead. Thankfully, the game actually gives you the ability to change all of the settings, so you can kind of get around that. But, you know, it's like, I feel like these are the kind of things that a dev should be checking, you know, before the game's release, and setting to a level where people can kind of just not have to think about sound mixing like some kind of fucking DJ or something just to be able to listen to the characters talk normally. When you try to fast travel, it just pops out a little side menu with text on it telling you which areas you can teleport to. But the issue with the text here is that it is never shown on the map at all. Like, why? Like, when you look at a map, it just shows you where each of these points are, but there is never a name stated there. And when you open the menu to try to fast travel around, it shows you just text without, like, hovering the map itself around the different points. Like in many other games, like when you try to teleport to a point, the map will just shift you so that you can see, like, oh, I get it, I'm going there. Like that is also missing. And the thing is that because you actually do need to use the teleportation to get around due to the fact that the maps are so big, it kind of starts to like get annoying that you have to try and figure out which point is which, sometimes by teleporting to the point, realizing it's the wrong point, getting frustrated, and then teleporting to the other point. Because if you don't use the teleportation at all, between the running around the dungeon itself, as well as like trying to get through all of the battles that randomly encounter along the way, you're probably going to find yourself taking an hour or more just to traverse a single dungeon where next to zero plot is happening at times until you get to the very end of the dungeon. So you really don't want to not use the teleportation crystals, and as a result, the issue with the UX of the crystals just becomes more obvious to the player. Speaking of something else you can do from the dungeon map, battles! We all love battles, right? In fact, we all love battles so much that every super popular multiplayer game is just about murdering each other. That's how much we lust for blood. That's a little worrying as a species, but aside from that, we all love having battle segments in game, and this game's one isn't any exception. It actually is, in concept, kind of interesting because of the fact that you basically have a 1v1 battle where you basically have to just attack and dodge as well as block the enemy's attacks. You have things like your perfect counters where you block at the right time, you can counter their attack and hit them back. You have magic spells, you have channel timings, you can time your spell casting as you hit them. You got all sorts of very interesting mechanics, all of which somehow manage to fall flat. So the basic controls themselves are pretty simple. You use circle to attack, you use the left analog to dodge left or right. It doesn't really matter whether you choose to dodge left or right, both essentially do the same thing because the enemy only ever really hits down the center. And you can then use the left bumper to block, the triangle, square and X are for you to cast your unique skills as well as spells, so you can only register a few at any given time. You use basic attacks to build up your MP, which is the multiple staggered bars at the top left, and you basically use those to then cast skills. You use the front analog to dash into the enemy, and you use the back of the analog to jump back. Or if you're already in the back, you can then hold back to run from the battle. So you do have two different alternating forms of combat in one, in that you can choose to attack the enemy and perform all of your attacks and combos from long range, or going close, at which point the enemy will use different attacks to react to you being close by, and you also gain a different set of attacks for your basic attack. While in close, and depending on your skills, you might have some that favor either close or long range attacks, with the advantage of close range attacks being that they tend to stagger the enemies more than the long range ones. So in and of itself, the system sounds interesting in concept. Like, it does really sound like something that you could do well and have it be really fun. So where does the problem then come in? I wish I could say that it was just one thing, but unfortunately things never are that simple, are they? So first up, there isn't really much incentive for you to go between the two ranges, because you either play as Toki or Towa, and you can't swap between them at any given time. Only one of them will ever be present on the field at a time. Toki, the pink hat girl, is the long range specialist. She specializes, and most of her unique abilities in terms of weapon abilities all use the gun. And for Towa, it's pretty much all knife based combat, so you want to go in close and attack the enemy from there. Which in and of itself, this too would have been fine if you could actually change between them in the battle itself. But the way the game works, you can only change it before the battle, either by using an item which you have to pay in-game gold for in order to swap between the two, or you have to swap when you level up forcibly. Yeah, I'm not kidding. You actually get forced to rotate between the two every single level. So you would play one full level as Toki, and then when you level up, you play as Towa until you then level up again. Which basically means that you kind of have this weird thing where you're always stuck with one character on the other. And the only real way to continue using the character you really want to would be to then forcibly go back to the thing and manually do the whole like swap again, which is all like kind of silly in that sense. You don't really have a good way to swap between them on the fly, which feels like it would have benefited this game's battle concept a lot better. And the reason why this is a problem is that it basically eliminates most of the incentive you have to alternate between ranges during the battle instead. You either stay at range with Toki or you run in melee with Towa. You don't really have a decision making as to when would be a good time to swap between the two of them in the battle to take advantage of this whole range concept. Dodging gets you through most of the attacks, except when it doesn't, because of the fact that the attacks are so long that you basically aren't able to dodge through the entirety of it. However, because of the fact that dodge has no animation cancel, at the end of the dodge, as you're coming back in, you can't immediately block to then block an attack if the attack is longer than your dodge timing. And you can't just stay at the side and, you know, do the normal human thing of like looking at the attack and going like, I don't think I want to jump back into that. You know, time to go back in. And the thing is that blocking as well is kind of not the best strategy to use non-stop, because blocking, you still kind of take damage, and if you block too much, you then get staggered and stunned, at which point you become super vulnerable for a period of time. So you kind of want to dodge, but the dodge is like kind of useless half the time, and you can't really rotate from the dodge to the block in a very good way. I've tried using both, and what I found out is that typically either you want to dodge an attack and an attack can be dodged, or attack can't be fully dodged, but you're still better off dodging the attack than tanking the whole thing, because tanking the attack always leaves you likelier to both be more damage as well as more potentially vulnerable, since you have a chance to get stunned, something that doesn't happen as likely if you just dodge in the first place. Which then brings me to the next point, which that actions are actually really heavy and slow. And I mean this, like, as someone who enjoys playing the From Software games, even those don't feel as clunky. Even Demon Souls, when it first released, didn't feel as clunky as this game does. Like, this game makes, I think, even the Jujutsu Kaisen Curse Clash feel a little less. Okay, nah, maybe let's not go that far. That game is about equally as clunky, so it both feels very irresponsive in the sense that you don't really have a way to get out of a combo, and if you're in the middle of an attack animation, you do not have any form of animation cancel, which in a Jujutsu Kaisen Curse Clash, you could say that, okay, that was a multiplayer game. I can kind of get it as a way to balance it such that players have an opening to hit each other with. But now we're actually talking about a single player experience, so some level of animation cancel in the middle of very long attack animations would have been nice, especially in the case of Toki, whose gun animations are super slow, I think one of the slowest in the game. And not only that, her attack skill, her special attack for it, doesn't actually have a stagger at the end of it, unlike Towa's knife 3-hit combo, which would actually stagger the enemy in the middle of whatever combo they're about to pull off. This is also made worse by the fact that your attacks can then be staggered. It is a lot easier for enemies to hit and stagger you mid-attack than it is for you to stagger them as Toki, so it actually feels horrible to play as her for the most part because you basically lose almost all ability to stagger enemies while they can basically break through your unnecessarily long animations to stagger you instead. This then brings us to the next point, which is that magic in this game is really severely broken. So the thing with this is that if you play the game from start to end, you kind of realize that okay, yeah, the magic itself is very broken balance-wise, in the sense that magic tends to do multiple times the damage that your physical and range attacks do. Like, even with a lower stat in magic attack than in physical or range attack, your magic's damage output will always be multitudes higher than physical and range. This is in part due to the fact that it has a charge up time, I suppose, and they wanted to give you a payoff for having to charge an attack, which basically puts you in a more vulnerable state. The only issues with this are the fact that, frankly, with how low the damage on Toki's gun is and the fact that it also puts you in a vulnerable state, I feel like the payoff of doing 5 to 10 times the damage of her rifle attack is a little much, unless enemies are specifically immune to magic, which there are a fair number of, so fair enough. At least you have some level of usage of those as well, but the issue is the tempo difference that it creates within the battles themselves, because every battle against an enemy where you can use magic could end within 5 to 10 seconds, and every battle against a single enemy where that can't be done is probably gonna last about a minute, maybe even more at times, due to how much slower and lower damage these attacks do, which kind of makes battles at times feel like a drag. And this leads even further into the issues with the battle, which is that each individual battle is not just a 1v1. It's a 1v1 in essence, in the sense that you're always fighting one enemy at a time, but after you beat an enemy, there is a possibility that the screen will just rotate, and then you'll go on to fighting another enemy. And this, as far as I have experienced while playing this game, can happen up to 3 additional times, meaning that you can fight up to 4 enemies in a row with the same HP, as well as carrying about your MP during the battle itself, because MP doesn't carry between battles, only during. And that is a little too draggy, especially considering the very minimal reward that battles in this game actually give you. And on top of that, the length of these battles essentially would also cause the animations to feel really stale very quickly, because most of the animations are just recycled. Every single attack type only has one animation. When Toki or Towa use their weapon skill, it just repeats the same animation every single time. When you use your basic attack, it's always the 3-hit loop animation every single time. Now, typically when you talk about an RPG game, battles, the number of hits a mook that you need to farm actually takes to go down tends to be very low, right? You keep it maybe like below 5 hits, especially in the early game where you don't really want every single battle to feel too draggy, because you actually want to progress the parts of the game that you want to hook players in with, or you want them to experiment and learn new things by testing stuff out in different battles. With this game, it can take upwards of sometimes 10 to 20, if not up to 50 hits, depending on the type of battle you're in and your level at the time, because the game really just does not do a good job of balancing all of this at all. And I do mean it when I say the game doesn't do balance well. Like, at the end game, the recommended level you're supposed to be at to do the final battles and all of the main story quests is about like level 40 to 50 plus. Somehow progressing the game normally, doing everything that's required of me, my level was only at 17 to 18. So like, where are they expecting me to sit there and grind out almost double to triple the actual level that I had gained progressing to this point in the game by just fighting mooks? Like, what? Does my time mean nothing to you? I mean, it probably does mean nothing to them, considering that it does seem like their own time really doesn't seem to be very worth to the company itself. But yeah, adding on to this is also the fact that enemies spawn fairly frequently and your encounters are random within the dungeon, meaning that you can't really avoid battles when you feel like they are pain. Maybe you just got out of a really long 10-minute battle and you think like, yeah, I don't feel like fighting a battle. Well, guess what? Unless you buy the equivalent of a repel in this game, you know, like the Pokemon thing that reduces your encounter rate, unless you buy that, you're just gonna be stuck with the same high encounter rate, just randomly getting into battles and just feeling like shit from having to grind over and over through 10-minute battles every like 1 minute or less or so. That and the design of the enemies themselves can get quite annoying as well. And by that I don't mean the physical design of the enemies. Those are, for the most part, okay to actually looking cool. So we'll leave that aside. The design physically of the enemies are fine. But when I say design, I'm talking about the design of their attack patterns and the design of their skills, how they react to your attacks and all of that. For example, you have the Manta Ray, and the Manta Ray is a very simple enemy. It will look for a good timing to come in and slap you in the face, but whenever it's not going through the animation or trying to attack you, it will basically stand passively on the spot and go invulnerable non-stop so that you are basically unable to hit it. The only issue with this is that you don't really have a good way to counterplay around the invulnerability. You're basically supposed to just sit there and not do anything and let him attack you, dodge his attack, then hit him back. And the thing with his attack is that you don't really have very good telegraphing of when he's gonna do his thing as well, so it makes the battle itself very off-tempo, because in an action style battle that this game has, you kind of have to constantly stop and wait for the enemy to do something, which can take a little while at times. And every time his invul triggers, it plays this very annoying sound like. So, Shrouded Moon.
Let's finish this.
Yeah, I remember what I said at the game about like poor sound balance. It's basically coming back to haunt us right now. Meanwhile, the spellcaster enemy is very one-note and boring. He just stands there and just channels his attacks over and over until you kill him. And his spells are basically something that have a little timer at the bottom, so you can just look at the timer and choose the right time to dodge. Great feedback, you know, considering the fact that the animations don't do a very good job of telegraphing the attacks themselves. I feel like this is something that should have been done by the animations, you know, show the players the information they're supposed to understand. You know, game design 101. And then you have this ninja robot swordsman mantis thing. I don't know what it's supposed to be. The game doesn't give a good explanation of what this is supposed to be or why this exists in the world either. It's just a thing that exists in the wild that attacks you apparently. Like if robots like this existed in our world, holy shit, I'll be scared shitless. But thankfully, the only robots that do exist in our world are the ones that our bosses try to replace us with, which is still terrifying. But at the very least, those don't seem to be as willing to just shoot bolts into our head. So for now, I'm still fine with our terrifying AI overlords. But his attack animations are pretty obnoxious as well. He just constantly spams attacks at range followed by shooting a smaller attack. And when he's using the longer range attacks, some of them, you basically just stuck there constantly dodging non-stop, looking for a very small window where realistically all you can do with the window is fire a single spell at him, which, you know, with how broken his spells are, it just kind of one-shots him. But it does feel kind of bad that there aren't much varieties in the way that you can deal with this enemy well, simply due to the systems that exist that basically make Toki feel very useless with her attack that's basically gonna get constantly staggered. Meanwhile, Towa can just like run in and just stagger the motherfucker with her fucking British knife. You know, there's a very big difference there, and it kind of feels very weird that the game works in this manner. But if there's one thing I really have to give the battle credit for, like one thing that I really think was done really well, it's the BGM that's used in the battle. Like, oh, that shit is so fucking good! Like, I can feel myself almost nothing just from listening to how good the music is. It's not due to some physiological like issue with my body. It just really is quite enjoyable. Like, you can really tell that the guy who made the music for East was really cooking with the battle music. Like, it's so good that I can feel myself wanting to make my imaginary like super battle montage into a reality, even though it's gonna look really shit. In fact, you know what? Even though it's gonna look really shit, I'm gonna do that right now, just you look.
You are like a brother to me, salaryman. Don't make me do this.
I'm sorry, but you have no choice on this matter.
I'm sorry, but if that's all you got, then this is my cup speed. Goodbye, old friend.
No!
This is the end.
That actually hurt a little more than I thought it would. I can actually taste the leek. Fuck. I actually taste the leek. Yeah, I can still kind of taste the leek right now. But either way, the music is fantastic in the battle and in many of the other parts of the game as well. Some parts of the track were a little mid, but I don't think there was any part of it specifically that was just wholly frustrating. And there were parts of it that were really good, and so I feel like when it comes to the battle, the BGM is just probably what carries it for me. But that said, while there is more to talk about with the battle system itself, let's put those aside for now because they are kind of tied to the later parts of the plot of the game. So as we get later into the game's plot, because we kind of need to talk about that as well, I'll bring up the rest of these points and show why the battle systems actually do end up devolving into greater shit and becoming completely broken as you get later into the game. But for now, let's get into the plot because... the plot. Where to begin? Okay, so right now we have to talk about the story, but how do I put this in a way that's like not too horrible? It's really corny and it's really cringe. Like, I don't think I read any main protagonist that's this cringe in a really long time. Like, I'm surprised that the writer who wrote this character is as big within the industry at least as he is. Although, to be fair to the guy, it does seem that he is really skilled at writing scenes of girls doing cute things together. You know, sometimes it's a little funny, but aside from that, he doesn't seem to have much experience writing a full-on story with a male and female like dynamic going on within the plot, and where he has to write a, I guess, supposedly comedic main character. Because really, like, the scenes are just like, I don't understand how anyone could have written a character this cringe.
ドライク、後で一緒にお風呂入ろうね。
ああ、私もドレイクになりたく存じます。トキさんにペッツとして飼われるなんて夢でございますね。
Also, if you think that the lip sync is off because of the fact that this game has an English dub, and the English dub is what the lip movements are supposed to be synced to, no. Even if you played the Japanese version of the game, the lip sync is still off. This is a thing that many people have already pointed out with this game.
私だってわからんぞ。トキがどうにかしろ。
They just couldn't get basic lip syncing right, in spite of the fact that it's Sunrise animating this thing. Like, I don't know what's up with that. Also, there's a lot of time wasting that goes on in this game. I don't feel like my time has been wasted as much as the last time the government got me to fill in some paperwork for my residential applications. Like, this shit is actually filthy with the amount of filler missions that there are within the main story's plot itself. Like, you literally have entire segments of the game where it's just you go into a cutscene, you get a quest to go to another area where you just have to go through a bunch of menus to go to the next area, get another cutscene, then go all the way back to the previous area, and all of this is manual. You don't walk through any part of the earth itself, and so it just all feels like a very big waste of time because of the fact that due to the way that this game is designed, every single time you transfer from cutscene to cutscene, you have to wait for the load times, and because of the fact that you're just moving over the menu over and over again, it doesn't really feel very interesting either. Like, at this point, why not just play all of the cutscenes in a line? You know, they could just have one cutscene in the forest saying like, oh yeah, we're going to the town, and then you just cut the scene, start again in the town and play it there. There wasn't really a reason for me to use this like fucking basic ass map to walk around. Like, it just is a good show of the fact that either someone was really high when they designed this, or they didn't care, or they really just wanted to spite the players and waste their time with menuing. But enough of me just talking about all the silliness of the overarching issues with the storytelling itself. Let me just give you a quick summary of the plot, although I get the feeling that this, to really put across how silly the plot is from start to end, it might take a little bit of time, but we'll try to make it as quick as we can.
So the game is split into 4 chapters, and in chapter 1, once we go back in time, the plot starts with Toki apparently talking to a fortune teller who apparently coincidentally predicted that the assassination would happen, and therefore the psychic has no idea how to help, and so Toki decides to leave the forest that you start in and try to figure out who the assassins could be and why they did this.
The first thing you do is go into the middle of the town to try and figure out what's going on. You find a bunch of people there who look like assassins and you decide to punch them in the face to get more information about where their boss is. Only thing is, after you punch them in the fucking face, it is revealed that they are not the Assassin's Guild, they are the Assassin's Guild fan club. In spite of the fact that they're just a fan club, somehow they actually managed to figure out the whereabouts of the actual Assassin's Guild. So like, yeah, I guess this super criminal assassin organization isn't really all too good at like hiding their location. If you think about it, I don't understand how they managed to pull off all of this when all of their secret bases and shit can just be found out by a bunch of weeps who just really like assassins. But we'll put it aside for now. So they give you a bunch of hints as to where to go, and then you basically go to those places and punch actual members of the Assassin's Guild in the fucking face until you find out the true whereabouts of their secret base where the main boss of the guild is hiding. And you go there to try and put a stop to the assassination. Except after you get there, you then find out that you trying to investigate this and trying to get to the boss is what basically triggers the assassination instead. Meaning that if Toki chose to not do anything in this entire situation, apparently the boss would not have launched an actual assassination. You know, this basically implies that he kinda didn't want to, and it's probably not the main culprit in the first place, but that ain't gonna stop us from having the plot think it is resolved, punching him in the fucking face until he decides to not do it. And then Toki just decides to go back to her timeline, in spite of the fact that when you really think about it, if this whole premise of her doing this was what caused him to get pissed, then that means that realistically, before she traveled back in time, he shouldn't have been the one who wanted to do the assassination. Even though it ended up being the case that he did, like none of that is actually making sense. But yeah, that's the entire plot of chapter 1 of the game. Remember, there are only 4 chapters in this entire game. At the end of chapter 1, they basically recycle the wedding scene that you get at the start of chapter 1. And this time around, after they recycle the first half of the scene,
では誓いのキスを
なんだあれ
That's right, we wake up in a spooky forest. It would seem that we pulled off a golden experience requiem cause it's part of the fact that her body didn't get stabbed over there. It seems that she travelled back and is completely fine. Either way, you are not dead, although I do feel like after the way the entire first chapter progressed that I wish I was dead, but we can leave that till after this game because we still have much to talk about. So Toki kinda gets confused at the end of all of this cause like the person who stabbed her was supposed to be her friend. And so now that we are somehow in this forest, coincidentally the fortune teller who apparently told her about the Assassin's Guild assassination thing is also in this forest, and we speak to her and try to figure out the situation that is going on. In case you're wondering what this person's name is, it's Makimona. You can feel free to forget that because it's not going to be that relevant information going forward. Although you may want to remember that face because that face might be. So you find your way out of this spooky forest into the spooky village, which looks like something out of some like Halloween event in a gacha game. And once you're there, you're then forced to do a random side quest in order to progress the plot. And yes, that is not me just being like an asshole and saying like, this side quest doesn't matter. No, you literally go into the village, you are given like 6 or 7 side quests, and you're just told to complete one of them, if not the game will not progress. You do that and you find out after that Reijo, which is the friend once again who, I think I forgot to mention the name earlier, apparently made a contract with some dragon to either kill the princess, which is the main protagonist, which is something that is barely touched upon, or if she doesn't kill the princess, then she is basically gonna lose the most important thing to her, which, don't worry, it's not her virginity, it seems, so you guys still have a chance at that if she's your thing. You then try to figure out how to nullify her contract and find out that the only way for her to actually do it is to actually fulfill the wish of the person, which was like part of the contract, which was something that she was trying to do. And then you find out that now she kind of can't fulfill the contract because you traveling back in time and spotting her in the forest trying to give a cake to Makimona apparently broke the contract because Makimona wanted Ricardo's cake, which apparently his cakes are super shit, but she really likes it. And Reiju was supposed to deliver her the cakes without getting spotted. You kind of see how silly this plot is overall. I guess in a way you could say it's like a light-hearted comedy thing, but remember how the first like chapter went? We were halfway through the game and we're still doing this like fucking like Disney Channel bullshit going on. Like, what the fuck is going on? So during the process you learn about Reijo's past, his childhood friend once again, and you find out that this like Halloween-esque looking village is where she used to live as a kid. Her parents both died in the village and she used to be super poor, and it was thanks to this like contract with the dragon that she became like super rich and all of that. And like she used to live like fully in this shithole that Makimona heads to the ghosts in. Because yeah, apparently all of the people in the village are now ghosts. I think I forgot to mention that earlier on, because don't worry, this is the last time you hear about it. So because of the fact that your friend is super depressed, you decided to feed her the cake of the assassin fan club, because apparently the assassin fan club run a bakery in town. And they make really shit cakes that aren't really good. Kind of a good thing if they want to become like actual assassins, because apparently their cakes are so shit that it puts people so close to death that when they do survive the cake, start to become able to see ghosts. And so what you're supposed to do here is feed the ghost-seeing cake to your friend and damn her to a life of being stuck looking at ghosts forever everywhere she goes, just so that she can talk to her parents who are dead one last time. Frankly, if you take out all the silly, like, loopy shit going on in the background, there is a kinda emotional scene going on here where you learn about the entire life of the childhood friend, and I feel like this scene in isolation could have worked really well, and then like at the end she sees the ghosts of her parents. They have kind of emotional scene, but that's all also ruined by the fact that they somehow decided that like in the midway through the near end of the scene, like Makimona will come in and cry in the most fucking sarcastic sounding way that it kind of just throws off all tension that the scene had.
いきなりそんな話反則だっつーの。私そういうお話とか弱いの。
意外。
But yeah, this fortune teller, psychic, ghost whisperer, asshole, crying, sarcasm lady, apparently, like she's so useless throughout all of this so far. Like, the only thing that she really did that was any semblance of plot in this entire second chapter is she kind of just became the reason that your friend is kind of fucked. And she basically just like did some really like weird shit where she pretended to be the ghost of the friend's parents, and it just seems like a complete dick the entire time. In case you're wondering, by the way, no, this does not have anything to do with the entire plot of the contract with the dragon. You still have no way to actually break the contract between her and the dragon. You literally go back to town after all of this happens and go like, I guess we don't have a way to solve the problem at hand. What do we do now? And then the brilliant like 5D chess move that the main character decides to go with, or I guess the main female protagonist decides to go with, is to basically just go to the dragon and punch him in the fucking face until he relents. Like, tried and true, the most timeless strategy of all time. If things don't go your way, just punch someone in the face until it does. And so you progress through even more filler until you get to the dragon, and then once you get to him, you're just told like, oh no, he looks too strong for us to beat. And then this scene happens.
どれやん。
ありがとうございます。てか、ありがとうネザヤン。すみませんネザヤンとか。
Nether Post, what the fuck is this bad dragon fucking hellhole of a line I've been thrown into? What the fuck is even going on? But by the way, the Japanese version actually isn't like this. I don't know what possessed the fucking furry scaly who made this to decide to go on Nether Post for this scene. But the Japanese version was just like some really cute and wholesome like nickname where it just tried to make them look like silly friends instead of like this. Like, I don't endorse that message. Then aside, it was here where the MC, which remember the main character is not them, even though they are the ones on the cover of the game or most of it. It is the very horny virgin dude, dragon person. This might be the one time in the entire game where he actually says something that is not just a complete cringe fest, which is where he actually notices that the contract is fundamentally broken because according to him, Reijou's, the thing that she treasures the most that she would have to give up if she doesn't want to kill her friend, was apparently her friend and her friend's wedding success. So in order for her to give up that, she would have to kill the friend, but she doesn't want to kill her friend, and then first she has to give up that, which means that she has to kill her friend, and so you kind of realize that there's a really broken loop here. And the dragon was like, ha! I knew that the whole time, and this was all set up to watch you suffer. Very big trickster vibes, you know, gives a little bit of that old Greek god-like vibe to him, where it's just like, it's just fucking with the humans just to like, see them shit themselves. That said, as a result, the team realizes that they have only one option left at hand if they really truly wanted to beat him, which is to report his ass to the National Consumer Affairs Center. The name is kind of slightly different in English, but that's the name that's actually used in the Japanese version of the game. This isn't some weird thing of like localizers doing something really weird with the localization and ruining the overarching plot that the supposed like Japanese people had for the thing. No. The Japanese plot for this game is as silly as the English version. Because, yeah, he apparently for a god dragon who has the power to like cause complete destruction and possess people and supposedly is so strong that like the kingdom can't do anything about him, he somehow seems to be really afraid of the National Consumer Affairs Center. This makes Nether Post turn into such a big curse that he somehow becomes beatable just because you threaten to report him to the agency. And so you basically get into a battle with him where he spends the entire battle reciting the corniest lines that he can at the main character. Once again, that's the blue dragon dude who calls him Nether Post, where they have this whole like weird like dude bro corny battle phrase thing that's like, if we were born in the same universe and another time we could have been friends. They were actually unironically tossing out all of this line right after the monologue where they threatened to report him to the government for being like a big evil demon that didn't keep its contract promise. Like the whole thing is really silly, but here they actually introduced a new battle system. Fun fact, this battle system is probably used like 3 to 4 times throughout the entirety of the game. That said, this battle system is even more boring than the previous ones, and that's because for this one you can really just move like left and right, a little bit forward and backward in a fixed map, and all you really need to do is just dodge his attacks while shooting 2 different attack types at him. And you also have a invulnerability skill, which is basically useless because you never really have to use a shield. You can just walk enough to the right or left to dodge the attack. And you have a heal skill, which kind of helps a little. If you suck at the game, that is. Just don't get scared shit, baby! Okay, this feels a little cringe. It feels a little weird that specifically for just this part alone, the magic itself was kind of scaled down, but we'll just pretend that didn't happen. Also just to note that at this specific segment of the game, it doesn't matter which of the characters you're using, the attack types they have are exactly the same because you can't customize your skills whatsoever unlike in the normal battle system. That, and as much as seeing new animations in the battle would have been cool, it was kind of really difficult due to the fact that for some reason they decided to, you know, just block out the animations from half the screen.
Like, come on, like the whole point of the game is to like stare at her ass or something. I don't know. Like, why do you have to do this to us? Like, seriously, who look at that and said, yes, this is what we're gonna do for character. We're gonna put the UI over the character, which is sort of the main focus of our game, about animating everything in the game world, including the characters, and just have it be like this. Like they should be fired. They drove him out of the company. But yeah, after you aura him in the face with a bunch of fireballs, you basically get him to nullify the contract and you just go back to the future again. And, you know, since we are only halfway through the game, as you can imagine, yeah, this time you get saved by the other friend who pulls out some Age of Tomorrow level of shit where she's just like, quick, go back to the past, and when you do, let the me from the past know that I've sent you. You know, it's like yeah, okay. Could this not have been developed earlier in the game or something? Though this time when you go back to the past, coincidentally, you're exactly able to find the friend who told you to go back and give her the code. Like there's no trouble doing it this time, you just happen to be there. And she somehow just instantly knows you're from the future. Even though like she isn't exactly prepared for what happens yet. Like she actually gets you to fill her in on what's gonna happen in the future and is like super shocked that she's even able to like stop the thing that happens in the wedding in the first place. Like I don't get it. Like she seems so unprepared for what is happening that it actually makes it like bizarre that she even knows that the time travel is even a thing. You know, at this point it just seems like the writers probably just gave up and just started to take the piss as well, because like let's listen to this insanity that the plot is turning into right now. The main characters are stuck in what is called a Mobius loop, which basically means that no matter what they try to do, they are destined to get interrupted because Toki's time powers allowed Towa to enter her body as a kid. And somehow they made a wedding vow, as in the two people, the two Yuri girls inside of each other's body, made a wedding vow to each other, thinking it was a vow of friendship. And somehow the cosmic powers decided that because these two girls made a wedding vow to each other as kids, that somehow it would be effective till death does them part, which basically means that the only way to resolve it is for one of them to disappear from the body. And this like weird cosmic power is apparently the thing that is causing this Mobius loop to happen, and it's basically causing one of them to die every single time they actually go back to the wedding itself. So at this point, we also find out that Toki's grandma is still alive, which is, you know, it is a thing. In spite of the fact that throughout the plot till now, rather than appearing before us, she has been getting Toki's friends to instead pass Toki relics, and just choosing not to do it herself in spite of the fact that it relates to Toki's superpowers about like time power magic. So they go to her to try and figure out if there is a way for them to actually get through this entire ordeal, at which point she says that like no, all of this is impossible. But in this very specific case of love and marriage, by virtue of the strength of the power of love, there might be something we could do. You know, the power of love trumps even the cosmic magics of the universe that apparently promotes the great strength of Yuri love instead. But apparently, in order to break this curse, we need to go to the 4 great spirits. That's pronounced in English in the Japanese version of the game as well. So it's
something new, great spirits.
And we have to get a set of items from them called the something 4. No, that's not a bit of me like actually forgetting the name of the items. The items are literally called the something 4. What the fuck do you mean the something 4?
メビウスの輪から抜け出すためにサムシング4っていう宝物を集めることにしたの。
Yeah, I've got something for you right here. So after this, you go back to Makimona, the grave caretaker psychic ghost whisperer, who apparently is also the guardian to the gates to the wall of the 4 great spirits, because yeah, why not just recycle character assets at this point? I mean, it's not like they have the budget and it's not like anyone cares anyways. And she basically casually opens the doors to the spirit wall so that you can visit the spirits one by one. Like, there isn't any like great power, great dungeon you have to clear to get into the spirit wall, some great relic you need to possess. You just literally go up to her and be like, hey, my homie, could you open the gate for me? And she just goes like, yeah, sure, but you better give me the something at the end. Not the something as in the but literally she just wants the something for as well after you're done, so that she can find like romance for herself in the future. Yeah, there's apparently a thing. And in case you're wondering, no, the Great Four Spirits, their entire existence is a meme as well. Like the first one is called Olden, and he gives you something old. No, I don't mean he's giving you like his very decrepit like family jewels or something. I mean that the item that he gives you is something that is literally called something old, and his name is Olden. Get it? The second one is called I Knew, which is for those of you Zoomers out there or the skibbity wrist people, you may not know this, but the I Knew is basically a parody of the iPod, which is like the hip cool thing for the kids back in the day. Not so much by the time this game came out, and he basically gives you an item called something new. The third one is someone called Burrow, who apparently is the owner or great spirit of something called something borrowed. No, it's not called something borrowed. The item is called something borrowed. You see why these names are so confusing. Also, their name is basically just a fucking pun. Like, we're really just going downhill bit by bit. Other thing with all of this is also the fact that all three of them basically had pretty much the same like character model as well. So like, and they were just being completely recycled at this point. The final one of the four was just a dragon called Draquas or something. And the last thing you needed to do for the four of the something four items that you needed to get is to basically get him Ricardo's cake. We got to bring back all of these characters from the past because it just saves budget. Gotta keep it silly as possible so people don't take your games seriously, right? That's what games are known for after all. Up to this point, there have been multiple jokes made about how shitty his kicks are and how they actually put people into near-death states. And so in his utter depression of everything that's happening, he decided to train in cake making in the mountains. And you find him at the end of the canyon, training with his two friends in what is typically called in Japan image training, where he basically went to the mountains and instead of actually setting up a little mini bakery there with a proper oven and all of that to train in baking, he basically sat there and just like visualized with the power of his mind, like his fucking Professor Xavier or something, the actual like kit that he needs, and he's just been like playing pretend baking the entire time. The joke here apparently is that it actually pays off and his garbage cakes actually become good. That's a plot. Anyway, you give the cake to the dragon. It's super disappointed the cake wasn't shit, but he gives you the thing anyway. Speaking of shit though, the sound that apparently they make when they are trying to get the item out of them, I don't know why they decided to make like a potentially like a shit joke here. Like not a joke that is shit, but a joke about shitting instead. Like, this feels like the kind of thing that a 12-year-old kid would have written. And let's not forget, these are written by grown adults who are typically skilled in writing about, just like teenage girls doing teenage girl cute things, and they're just here doing this instead. It's like, they didn't just not get paid enough, and was this their way of spiting the developers of the game because they weren't getting their pay or something? Like, this is very bizarre. Either way, the plot hasn't gotten silly enough yet, so after all of this happens, you basically go up and try and get out of the fourth spirit realm. And this is where Makimona and her ultimate jealousy comes up to you and decides that she just kind of wants to get married, and so she's gonna like try to punch you in the face and take the items from you so she can live her best life and doom you guys to a life of eternal damnation instead, which kind of also means that she is stuck in eternal damnation because if you can't break out the loop, she can't get married. So All of this does not make any sense whatsoever. She's just being a rational asshole again, for the sake of plot convenience and so that you can have a boss battle. For some reason, and it's part of the fact that she's been played as this like gag character with all of this weird side jobs this entire time. She apparently, like, I guess maybe it has something to do with the four spirit realms and have connections to it or something, but she basically has a skill that hits you so hard that unless you're above a very certainly high level, you would be 100% one-shotted at this point. For you guys to understand like what the state that we're in at this point in the game is, me clearing all of the story parts as intended, as well as doing like a small number of side quests, as well as like running through the dungeons as per intended and meeting all the, like, I guess the expected number of enemies along the way. The me who did all of that was level
21.
Remember, we are in the near end of chapter 3. The recommended level for the main stories at this point are level 50. You think you couldn't have balanced your game better such that I was, actually at least halfway to the recommended level by this point? Yeah, I don't know how they managed to balance this game this horribly. I feel like with RPG games, the game story should progress and give you enough EXP in a way that you are at the expected level needed to be at the bare minimum to be able to clear the entire game. So if you were to just do the whole thing without any grinding, the game should be super challenging, but it should be still possible to clear all of it with the resources you have at hand. And the grind itself should basically be the way for, if you find the game to be too challenging or too difficult at that point, to then be able to compensate for the difficulty by just grinding through a bunch of enemies to get yourself to a point where you're strong enough to breeze through it. Kind of like a main protagonist going through a training arc to get through the final big bad or something like that. The game should at least, however, even then try its best to ensure that you get through the expected number of battles and still be able to be at least some semblance of a level of being able to clear the game. This game has failed miserably in that attempt. So realistically speaking, I would have to at least double my level in order to be able to survive the one shot. However, I don't know if this was left in intentionally or the devs were just like so out of it that they never realized this was an issue in the first place. But they actually had a feature in the game that basically just destroyed the game's entire balance. So one thing I have not mentioned till now, but that has been brought up a few times in the plot, is the whole idea of time magic. So Toki has the ability to travel back in time, and that's how the plot moves along. So aside from that, you do gain access to time magic along the way with each chapter, where you basically are told by one of your friends that they have a relic from your grandma, and you need to basically use the relic to access like some time wall, and you do like a hyperbolic time chamber shit where you fight some enemies and gain and use the new abilities you get. The ability to reverse time, this one is completely useless because all it really does is just reverse you back, or just I guess rewind time to some extent to put you back maybe like a few seconds ago, and it basically replenishes your health all the way back to that point in time. So basically if you took a hit that you really didn't want to, you could revert back in time to ensure you do not take the hit. So the reason why this is completely useless is because you don't really have any incentive to ever want to revert back in time. If you take a hit and you are low on health, you can just use a potion, or if you're not in a boss battle, you can just leave the map and come back and you'll be fully healed. So this is a skill that you almost never use because there isn't really a reason to use it unless you manage to somehow panic hold a button when you're about to die, and then you can just reverse exactly to just before the attack hits you, so you can try to dodge it or do something to get around it. The other skill you get is the ability to speed up time. This skill is almost completely hot garbage. For some reason, the timings of your actions, certain frames are now either more sped up or more delayed than they would have been if you were both at the normal speed instead. So if you were to try and dodge, their attacks are gonna be likely to hit you because for some reason the dodge animation seems to be going at potentially 4 times speed while you might be going at 2 times speed, for example. So it actually makes it a lot easier for you to get killed if you are fighting an enemy with a lot of like spraying attacks, or if you can't like perma-stun the enemy. And then there's the third and final skill that you get, which is arguably the strongest one in the game, where you basically get the Dio Brando ability to just stop time. Except that unlike Dio Brando, who can only do it for 10 seconds, you can basically spam this skill in a loop that basically keeps the enemy permanently locked in a time freeze for as long as you have enough stacks of the time warping abilities. So the way you get more stacks of this is that you either level up and that replenishes all your stacks, or you go back to your home and that replenishes all your stacks as well. Or you apparently could just go to the shop and town and buy a time stone that apparently lets you replenish your super secret royal family time magic. So the entirety of this battle can be trivialized with the power of money. Basically just buy like funny super stones that let you pause time, and you can basically you know, when I was streaming parts of this game, one of the viewers, Yuri, actually mentioned that this game feels like it would work better as a mobile game. Holy shit, this game basically became the equivalent of a mobile game at this point, because yeah, you basically get the ability to solve all of your life's problems and trivialize all of the difficulty in the game by spending money. Thankfully, you don't have to spend real life money, but you know, it still stands very well there. Like, you know, because like, holy fucking shit, what the fuck is this game's balance? So you beat Makimona, and she like just somehow cries a lot and decides that like, yeah, you know what, yeah, maybe I don't want to be stuck in a loop of eternal damnation with you guys. And she doesn't actually say that. No one's in the game seems to address the implications of this whole like eternal loop thing at all. And she tries to give them back the items, and somehow in the process she managed to drop the something for off the sky bridge. And don't you guys worry, this is the last time we'll see any talk about the something for, so it is completely irrelevant to the rest of the plot going forward. Don't you love how like an entire chapter's like content basically results in like a complete nothing burger? And some like weird power of friendship moment, and I don't even know why this had happened. Toki's original 3 friends as well as Makimona are apparently somehow are able to conjure up their own equivalent of like precious items that count as a fake version of the something for her to bring back with her to the future, where that's somehow supposed to work. Was there any reason why we had to go to a bunch of gods to get their item if this would work? It doesn't matter. They go back to the future. They decide that even in the worst case, they're just gonna live with the fact that the world is like fucking damned, that they're gonna be stuck in a time loop forever. A little sad, a little solemn of a moment, if not for the fact that this gets ruined by the appearance of the true big bad of the entire series, which is Mobius themselves. Yeah, yes, Mobius apparently is a living being that exists, and is apparently living inside the hourglass that Toki carries around, that has the weird sexy man narrator voice you hear in many animes. Turns out that they are Mobius the whole time. They've been like living inside there, trapped by the power of the something force or another. And like now they managed to break free, and they turn somehow into a white hat like lady with a Kansai accent. Like, what the fuck is going on? Who basically has this weird ass looking like fucking I don't know what to call that. And she decides to like travel back into the past and like try to prevent all of this from ever happening, and to like wipe Toki's memories, so that somehow this would stop them from stopping her and she can get away free and live her best life instead. So she travels back to like 6 months before and possesses the body of the assassin boss man, and you basically at this point go through an entire boss rush. The boss are slightly scaled but not really. Makimona actually ends up being weaker because she actually doesn't use the one-shot ability anymore. But aside from her, everyone else is basically just a little bit tougher, but nothing that you can't just get through in one try. And in case you're wondering, no, the big villain of this game doesn't actually have any great grandiose plan that they really want to do. She just apparently kind of wants to just spend her time like fucking watching soccer matches every day. But yeah, this boss rush then culminates in you fighting Mobius themselves in their true form. Both forms apparently, because they apparently have 2 forms. One is the dragon form, which looks like some fucking bootleg Dragonite for some reason. Before that, the plot actually does make a little bit of a surprise plot twist, which is that when you're fighting the dragon form, you realize that you can't like completely beat them, and it is revealed to you that the reason why this dragon can't be defeated is because this dragon is being kept alive by the power of the vow that keeps Toki and Towa as Yuri buddies forever. Toki's grandma comes out and goes like, "Don't worry, kids, I will save the day. I'll go back to when you're 5 and tell you not to make the vow." And somehow now you can beat the boss in that form, and you beat him so hard that he finally transforms back into the Kansai speaking girl form, because that's the stronger form, even though the male dragon form seems to be the main form he takes during the entire time. But yeah, this brings us to the final battle in this game, the final big bad boss. And yeah, this boss battle is also hot fucking garbage. So the thing with this boss is that you kind of can just do like everything that I've been talking about and just basically pause the battle and aura them to death with the power of Dio Stand. But the issue with this boss is the fact that every time they go below 50% HP, they will basically trigger a full heal. So you actually need to ensure that your inputs are frame perfect, or they'll just constantly heal back. If I'm understanding this right, the way this fight was designed, what most people who actually have a brain and who actually have the perseverance to play this game legit, what they actually did was basically to actually grind, and they try to one-shot the boss past the halfway mark point so that the boss does not get a chance to full heal. However, you know, me being me, I have neither the patience to actually try to clear this game legit, and hey, if they're gonna put me at a very low level, I'm gonna be a man and assume that like this is the level of challenge that they actually want from the game, and I'm actually gonna clear the game at the level I was at with like minimal grind at all whatsoever. Very fun experience. I think it took me like close to 3 hours to do this. Some people might say that if I took all of the time that I invested into just like pausing the battle and clearing all of it like this, I could have probably actually gotten to the legit level where, you know, you could actually clear this. I would beg to differ, since the EXP gain in this game is hot garbage, alongside with all of the gold gain in this game, which is also hot garbage. You're probably gonna have to do all of the side quests, I'm assuming, but all of the side quests in this game are either fetch quests or quests that ask you to hunt a specific enemy in a specific dungeon. They're all super repetitive. The plot line doesn't matter. I think the few that I actually did was silly shit that was basically like, oh, we gave you a free sample of stingray. We ran out of stingray for our store. Could you go get us some stingray? And that's the entire plot of the thing. Like, it's all silly shit like this, and they don't really give that massive of a reward either. Well, one thing also I forgot to mention till this point, because it's so irrelevant, is the fact that when you run in battle as well, you actually lose money. But they actually deduct a portion of your money every time you try to flee from the battle. So that is just another like horrible system altogether. I don't know why that had to be in the game. Like, it's bad enough that the battles are that long. The last thing the player really needs is to be penalized when they try to leave a battle instead, because they kind of want to save time for whatever reason. But this game really seems to want to make you suffer as much as possible. In fact, we actually got to the credits, and when we did, I was actually so happy. I actually felt like throwing up either way, because of the fact that like the battle had left me so sick to my core that I could only just sit there and stare in awe at the fact that I actually survived through the whole thing. And I just sat there in a weird state of like feeling completely sick and extremely happy and free at the same time. It was a very strange emotion, to say the least. But yeah, at the end, when you get to the final battle, you're actually supposed to make a choice between whether or not you want to keep Toki or Towa around. And you're meant to be a very dramatic moment just before the final boss where you're like, oh shit, we really have to give up one of them in order to make things right and be able to actually beat the boss to ensure that at least one of you can be happy. Look. See here, Toki, you know, you're great and all. You're really cute. It's your body. You deserve to have the freedom to decide, and I know you let us decide which of you would get to be free because of the fact that like you want to be the good girl, you are the good girl, but look, we need to take it seriously now. You don't have a stagger skill, so I'm sorry, but we're putting in Towa instead. Toki and no longer friends with because they have been erased from existence. So yeah, the game kind of just ends off with us sacrificing Toki and marrying Towa in the end. And it's a solemn and still a happy scene because the freedom has been gained for them. They have basically managed to rid themselves of the cup because of the fuck is that?
まるで時みたいだ。きっと時は永遠の中で生き
Toki, is that you?
And I know, some of you might be thinking that maybe I'm being way too nitpicky with this last point. Maybe it was actually mentioned somewhere in the plot that they could just interchange between the forms and both of them could assume both of the hair color forms and that's all of that. But you see, the thing is that I don't think that was mentioned ever in any part of the main story. The only way you can change between the two forms throughout the entire plot is typically through happenstance or by using pepper. It feels like overall the plot tries to give you the impression that it's not something that they could control. I can kind of understand if the plot's whole point was that she didn't want people to know that, she's not Toki, she's actually Towa, and that she can actually like just transform and her hair color changes and all of that. But she just does that literally in the middle of the wedding and they just celebrate the wedding as per normal, as if nothing wrong had happened the whole time. And because of the way that the timeline changed, technically, I don't think Toki ever existed in their timeline anymore since their grandma of Toki Towa went back in time to prevent the whole thing and he chose to have her erased, and like even Towa didn't actually remember Toki's name at the time because all of her memories have been wiped. So I don't know, this whole point at the very end, like we couldn't even end off on a point that made sense. Yeah, it's a happy ending, but still, it's an ending that makes no sense at all. In a way, if this was meant to be a very big like meme game, like we're talking about like some kind of like South Park game or something, maybe I could let all of this slide since it's meant to be silly and absurd and like horrible and meant to have jokes that are outright filthy in that specific case. But in this case, it does feel like they were going for a very serious image with the advertising, all of that at the start. And it only was when it started to get more and more into the plot that we started to see all of this come out. Granted, it feels kind of like a rom-com, like fantasy harem thing from that era, but at the same time, the entire thing just feels like it takes itself a little too unseriously in a way that actually at times, at least in a Japanese context, feels very cringe. Also, in case you're wondering, the game does actually have a true end. However, the only way you can actually get a true end is to play through New Game Plus. Yeah, suffering through this game, once is not clearly not enough. And so they want you to play through this at least a second time to see the true end, where you basically need to keep the relationship between both Toki and Towa balanced. And if you do so, you get to the ending where both of them actually survive and they both get to live, and it's a happy ending, except that somehow in the ending they're just hugging the main character who is back to being a dragon again. Either way, the true ending, kind of happy. I actually prefer it to the other two endings simply because both of them get to survive, and seeing cute girls survive a horrendous ordeal, that's always a better thing than seeing one of them get completely wiped from existence, so I have no complaints. Also, one thing I have to say that I really do like that's in this game is the actual like in-game CGs, which I almost never use. Like those actually look really good. It's a shame that they don't really use those for the game itself. I feel like if the game was largely doing most of its cutscenes using images like this and with like 2D stills of the characters, I may have actually enjoyed it more than the weird like 2D, 3D mixture that they were going for. It's a shame that, they only have like 11 of the CGs in the entire game, which, yeah, fair enough. It's not the main point of the game. The main point of the game is to show you the world as it is drawn in anime, which is clearly not what the CGs end up being. So, fine, they didn't have too many of those. But if you're really interested in the CGs, there's always another good way to get more, which is to buy the DLCs. Yeah, those are actually quite alive in this game. You can kind of see they were way ahead of the curve doing that in 2014 before most companies started doing it as well. They had a total of 5 DLCs, each one at 500 yen with about 10 minutes of just sub-scenario content, so you do get more plot
500 yen for 10 minutes is a little hard to justify, but it does come with more CG, so maybe not too much individually, although if you buy all 5 it amounts to 2,500 yen, which at that point, you're still spending less than most people spend trying to get the banner on a gacha, so I guess it's still not too bad. But yeah, overall I do feel like this game, there was an idea that did have a lot of potential buried within what ended up being this Kasou game. Like, I can see a world where maybe if they had a much bigger budget and they had a much bigger team of developers, maybe they could have made this whole thing work. But unfortunately, the dev team, the company that's producing the game, was going through all of that internal conflict, and that I can imagine would have probably hurt their ability to put as much effort into this game as it would have been necessary, right? Because when you're gonna take a big risk and make something fairly revolutionary in its own way, you kind of want people who are willing to take risk rather than a company where the culture has sunk into the whole idea of just playing it safe instead. And so this title, it feels like the goals that were initially set up when the title was suggested and what the people who were in the company were trying to do may have been at odds, perhaps. And as a result, we ended up with a game that feels kind of very half-assed. The graphics were kind of off for a game that was trying to push itself based off of its graphics. These cutscenes, the travel on the battle map, even the cutscenes on the battle map, which, you know, considering the fact that everything should have been a still frame, felt very off. The battle system was quite broken. I mean, granted, it does feel like a system that, if implemented and balanced well, it could have been fairly fun. But this would have required quite a fair bit of change. I feel that the battles need to be individually shorter for the standard mobs, and the progression of the EXP and gold that you gain from the mobs should have been balanced better as you leveled up, so that there would be more incentive for you to grind even as you get later into the game, and it also ensure that you would have gotten closer to the required level or the expected level that they would have wanted you to be at, rather than being less than half of the way there. Overall, out of all the Kasou games we have played till now, I would say this one actually isn't as bad. Now, granted, it's not the least worst of them all. There are titles that are somewhat better than this is, but we have played like much worse. Being a game that was almost 8,000 yen back in its day, which would mean that it would have been fairly close to like 70-80 plus, quite close to a AAA title's pricing at the time, does feel like a very strong ask. I feel like we're almost reaching pro golfer Saru levels of silliness, except that this game does have at least some cute goals with some nice CG and a fairly interesting battle system, even though it was poorly implemented. So in like, if we had like the 9 layers of Kasou game hell, it would be closer to the top, where it's a little less hell than all the rest were, although the final few bosses would probably put it like down a few notches, somewhere in the middle instead. Especially because of the music. By God, the music was great and the CG was pretty nice, and the art by Wolfan and the seiyus were great. Everybody other than the game developers did a very good job in the production of this game. And when it comes to creating a game, it's not just about the people who are balancing the game, but also all the people who support it. And thanks to all of these other people, I have to say, the experience was a lot better than it would have been, and we thankfully didn't get another Ogo no Kizuna. But that said, I feel like I've kept you guys for long enough. This video has ended up way longer than expected, due to the fact that there was quite a lot to talk about with this game, especially when it came to the plot. I feel like maybe I may have spent a little too much time talking about the plot, so by the time you see this video, maybe I would have shortened it to some extent at this point. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this game, compared to all of the other games I've played in the past. Do you think this game was actually that bad? Like this is not me trying to like force engagement. Like, I am genuinely curious, because this game actually, while it was elected for the Kasou Game of the Year list, it didn't actually win the worst game of the year for its year. And to be fair, I don't see this as actually being on the level of the worst. In fact, arguably, there may be a world where some people might say that, like, yeah, this game is bad, but it's not Kasouge levels of bad. And you know, there might be an argument for that as well, and I'm genuinely curious. So do let me know in the comments what you guys think. Anyway, that's all for me for today. I'll be getting back to doing more stuff and looking for more I mean, I don't have to look, the console games are right behind me, but I have plans for more. And some of them might actually be worse than this one by a fair margin, so you can look forward to that. Thank you to the very cool people over here who helped to support the channel, and to all of you guys for watching this video till this point. That's already pretty impressive considering how sillily long this video is, so much thanks. I have nothing more than gratitude to say for you sticking with me through this experience of something or another. But that said, until next time, this has been all from me. Take care and bye.